Hey guys, today I'm going to start our read aloud. My plan is to read from our book, The Seer of Shadows, the one that we were working on in class. And I want to thank scholastic.com for giving us permission to read the book aloud. I also got permission from Avi, and I wanted to thank him for allowing me to continue reading this book aloud to you. The videos will be posted on YouTube, and then the link to the YouTube video will be posted in Google Classrooms for you guys to watch. I do have to delete them at the end of June, so make sure that you listen or watch the videos by then. At the end of each chapter, I'm going to give you a question to answer. So be thinking about that question and be thinking as I'm reading, because the question I'm going to ask you is going to be about the chapter. And of course, you can always go back and re-listen to it. All right, are you ready? I'm excited. Okay, chapter 13. We stared at each other. Remember, we, meaning Horace and Peg. Remember, he was off on search for pictures of Eleanor because according to Mrs. von Mock, they were all over the house. So he was searching. And remember, he went up to that third floor, which looked a little strange. He thought maybe they were the servants' quarters. And then he walked into what he thought was Peg's room and found a picture of Eleonora on Peg's nightstand. And remember, Peg came in and interrupted him. We stared at each other. I with much embarrassment, she open-mouthed with surprise. Peg spoke first, and she did so with anger. What are you doing here? Mr. Middleditch's words came to my mind. I was just admiring the house, I managed to say. She glared at me. There's nothing to admire here. At a loss, I turned and pointed to the picture. There's that. The anger seemed to drain from Peg. Tears welled in her eyes. She was my darling sister, she said softly. She had the room next door. She was up here, I said, in that empty room. Those were her happy times, said Peg, when we were alone together. I was bewildered. Could this girl be touched after all? Remember, touched meaning crazy. Could this girl be touched after all, as Mr. Middleditch had suggested? I found it impossible to believe that Eleonora von Macht, daughter of such wealth, would have lived in so mean a place, nor that this black servant girl would be her sister. And was that, I asked, trying to draw her out, when she told you she had died of neglect? Of course not, she returned, her voice instantly tinged with fierceness. She told me that after she died. I stared at her. How was she able to do that? She whispered into my heart. Stood there and told you. She was dead, returned Peg. I know that. But since I knew her better than anyone, I can always hear her voice. Then wistfully, she added, I would give anything to speak to her again. I almost said, but didn't, my father's refrain. Let the dead bury the dead. She sensed something of my thoughts. You don't believe me, do you? She said. I saw no point in arguing, for as my father also used to say, don't debate the superstitious, pity them. And I needed to get back to Mr. Middleditch. I'm wanted below, I said, and I fear I went rudely past the girl as I made my way to the first floor. My timing was good. Mr. Middleditch had just concluded his photo session. The exposed plates were stacked. Mrs. von Mock was sitting in much the same way as before. Ah, there you are, Horace, said Mr. Middleditch, his face working hard to suppress a smile when I appeared. It was a relief he did not wink at me. He nodded to the plates. They're ready for you. So I was not able to tell him that I had only taken 3 pictures. I simply gathered up the boxed plates and went down to the scullery. Once inside the room, I locked the door. Not only did I not want Peg to come in and distract me with her strangeness, I truly needed to concentrate. Besides, I needed to take off my coat and remove the secret camera from around my neck. I began my work by pouring the developing solution into one porcelain tray, the fixing solution into another. Next, I ran some water into one of the sinks. Then I took the exposed plates from their shields and put them into the developer fluid, pyrogallic acid, and silver iodide. There is something almost magical about the developing of a photographic image. Consider, You stand quietly in a room with a dim yellow light that fills the air with an enchanting twilight glow. That glow always seems to transport me to another place, a demi-world where images, like shy spirits, lie in wait. Holding your breath, you peer into a chemical brew. Not so very different, I suppose, from sorcerers of old when they gazed into their magical potions. Gently, you slide the exposed but blank glass plate into this chemical bath. You wait for something to appear as if waiting on the shore of a mist shrouded lake. Slowly, a shadowy image begins to reveal itself. It's as if the shadow were coming from some mystic depth, emerging from another world, little by little, taking bodily shape and form until that shadow becomes real. Just what one would expect, would want from a ghost. But the image on the glass is backward. That's to say, what is dark is light, what is light is dark, a negative image, which only enhances its otherworldliness. During the whole process, you must watch the image intently. Too much developer, and the negative turns as black as soot, becoming irretrievably lost. It's as if the image, coming as it does from an unreachable void, plunges back into the emptiness from whence it came. Unless you hold the shadow and embrace it tightly, it will vanish forever. So it was then, as each image came into view, I had to determine its peak, after which I snatched it from the developer and plunged the plate into the fixing solution. By so doing, I locked each image in time, caught it in visible life. Though it all appears magical, even mystical, the true wonder is that the process is entirely chemical. Human reason, my reason, controlled it. What a sense of mastery it gave me. I, Horace Carpentine, would turn a shadow into something real. Once the developing process had been accomplished, the plates went into a water bath to wash away any remaining silver nitrate and thus make certain no further development took place. One by one, I did this for Mr. Middleditch's 11 plates. All his negative images appeared good. He would be pleased. After I'd finished processing Mr. Middleditch's images, I turned to the circular plate, the secret pictures I'd made. In this case, all three of my images would be on one plate. My first pictures. Never mind the circumstances, I was excited. With great care, consider how much depended on what I had accomplished. I placed the round plate into the developing bath, then watched and waited with great expectation. Almost simultaneously, the images of a girl's face rose up before my eyes. 1, 2, and 3. 4. 4. There's an ancient and surely worn out expression that of not believing one's own eyes. Such was my state as I stared at the small round glass plate and its 4 images. What I was seeing made no sense. I struggled to find an explanation. In fact, I stared at the images for so long, I had to plunge the disc into the fixing solution before I lost them utterly. As they lay in the water bath, I made myself recall the pictures I had taken. I had begun by taking 2 pictures in the hallway of the portrait. The third was taken in Peg's room, the small picture that she had on her table. I was certain I had only taken those 3 images. Nonetheless, there were, I could see quite plainly, 4 images. How could that be? Then, with great relief, I remembered. When Peg came into the room, I had been so startled I swung about in haste and tripped the shutter. In so doing, I must have taken a picture of Peg. That would be the 4th image. My emotions calmed, I had found a rational explanation for what occurred. I gazed into the water because the pictures on the round plate were quite small, negative, and in water. The identity of that 4th image remained unclear. Surely, since no one else was in that room, it had to be Peg. But was it? Okay, that's the end of chapter 13. So your question that you will answer is, who is going to be on that 4th image? And how did it get there? All right, I'll see you next time for chapter 14.